So, hello everyone, I'm Becky Jones, I'm Head of Special Projects at Appear Here. Just a little bit of scene setting for anyone that might not know what we do. Super simply, we're an Airbnb for retail, and we've launched stores for the likes of Chanel, Marc Jacobs, Kanye West, Marina, who we've got on our panel tonight. And I think we started right here in London, and kind of super small business. Now we're in New York, we're in Paris, soon LA, which is an exciting journey for us to be on, and I'm sure many of you guys will be on a similar one there. Thank you so much for joining us at our first underground session of the year. Going to be talking all about the future of fashion, what's good, what's bad, what really needs to change to make things interesting. Just before we kind of kick off with introductions, we'll be doing a quick Q&A at the end. If you're feeling a bit shy, you can send it in to us. If you do @Appear Here and #underground sessions, we'll have someone kind of rounding that up at the end. So, introductions. First, we have Rob Jones, co-founder of Teatum Jones. And Teatum Jones, I think most of you will know of. They're a London-based luxury label stocked in some of the best kind of luxury department stores in the world. Harvey Nicks, Saks Fifth Avenue, fantastic. You recently won the super prestigious Woolmark Award. Yeah. And I've got on my paper a whole host of other awards that you've also won. So you guys are clearly absolutely smashing it. Then next we have Dr. Anna Roncha, not going in order. Who is course director at the London College of Fashion, specialising in strategic fashion marketing. And you've got over 12 years of experience kind of guiding people through their strategy for massive international brands, fashion, lifestyle, all of that. So hopefully bringing a wealth of experience to this. You're also partnered with the World Economic Forum on the future of fashion and technology, all very super exciting. And then next we have Marina, who, I don't know if anyone's seen Marina's stores, but it's basically everything that is kind of slick and on point and absolutely, utterly Instagrammable in everything you do. And you have a range of gorgeous silks every season, changes with a different colour, and then there's also launched the Basics store, which is just an awesome collective of some of London's best designers, the likes of Alexa Coe, of Blake London, all of those guys. And we might have seen the Basics store in Notting Hill and on Red Church Street, and hopefully some others quite soon.
Hopefully.
And then finally, we have Gabriella Nassif, who is co-founder of PR agency MGC London. Worked for the likes of Prada, Stella McCartney, Carla Otto, lots of huge names, but I think most interestingly right now, pulled off the PR coup of the century, basically, by doing Richard Quinn's Fashion Week show and having that actually attended by Her Majesty the Queen, which is a pretty amazing feat to pull off. So, to kind of kick things off, I want to start looking at what the state of fashion is today, whether it's good, whether it's absolutely awful, don't know. London Fashion Week just happened. Was it interesting? Was it exciting? So maybe Anna, if we kick off with you.
I think I don't think there's ever a season where London Fashion Week isn't interesting. So I think that's one of the things we can say. I do think that this Fashion Week is set in a wider context, and that's something we were discussing prior to the session, which is all the changes that are happening worldwide, whether it's about the whole uncertainty from a political atmosphere, whether it's the rise of new consumers and how we shop for fashion, how we interact with fashion. So I think in that context, definitely, I do think that all fashion weeks would have a bit of a challenging time. I do think, however, that with London Fashion Week, what comes across is always a huge amount of creativity and a very wide understanding of how we can adapt to these challenges using creativity as our main focus. And I think that's something that we see every season. And I do believe that we're in a very good position to surpass these challenges for that reason, for the creativity and for the focus that we show in terms of adapting to the market.
And Rob, for you?
For fashion weeks, for a designer, it's you're in a bubble. So as much as there's everything going on, it's quite hard to comment on what I think Fashion Week is, because we are locked away, working intense hours to create something that we believe in. So our heads are focused on that. I mean, you see bits on Instagram and stuff what other people are doing, but for us, it's kind of we're just focusing on telling our story and pushing that out in the best way that we can. So, for me, that's
okay.
That's
laser focused on your own things, really. And then Gabriella, I guess, your story was the story of Fashion Week. Kind of taking that to one side, what else was interesting? What were the other stories? Was there, if you look at things like the state of play today, Trump, Brexit, Me Too, all of the stuff going on, fashion used to tie into that, used to play with it a lot more than I certainly think it's doing today. Do you agree? Is that something you're seeing?
I mean, my answer is going to be very similar to Rob's. I get sucked into a bubble when you're working on a show. It's your main focus, and considering my show was quite a historical moment, I didn't have time to look around at other shows or think about, external factors. I think that I was very focused on my show, and I didn't really notice what was going on. I do see it on Instagram, I do see it on social media, but it's not quite the same as sitting there and watching designers and their new collections. I think that we're very focused, and you don't really get a chance to have an external opinion. I think it's worth asking someone probably who was sitting in the front row, as opposed to people who were in the backstage who were so determined to make this show a success.
And I guess everyone will have seen the picture of the Queen sat next to Anna Wintour. My mum, who knows nothing about fashion, sent me a picture of it and said, haha, isn't this fantastic? How did that come about? How on earth did that happen?
Well, Richard Quinn was appointed an award, and it all came about because I think the British Fashion Council have been very determined to make the royal family more involved in British fashion. And more, every year, they kind of push harder and harder. And I think that we have an amazing British Fashion Council. Caroline Rush is just phenomenal. And she has been working very closely with Angela Kelly, who is the Queen's personal dresser. And Angela Kelly had this idea whereby she would make an award and she would name it in honour of the Queen. And the Queen would award it all for the first season. But going on, I think it will be more a senior member of the royal family. But Angela Kelly came up with this idea and persuaded the Queen that it would be a really amazing thing to support the fashion industry, and the Queen obviously agreed because she's so involved in fashion. She's changed fashion for us, so it was kind of natural. And then it was awarded to Richard Quinn because he is phenomenal and he gives back so much to society. He's not just a designer, but he welcomes students into his studio and he offers them his printers and he helps them. So he's not just an amazing designer, but he's also gives so much back to his community that it just seems so fitting anyways, the Queen showed up and it was this moment that was just so monumental.
That must have changed the show
so
a bit,
incredible.
though,
How did you keep it a secret?
It was kind of impossible. So people were coming through the door and they were saying, I just saw the Queen upstairs. And I'm like, you shouldn't have seen that. I don't know what you're talking about. There's no Queen upstairs. And they're like, look at this photo on my phone. The Queen's upstairs. And I'm like, I didn't see that.
How long did you know it was happening for?
We all knew for a while, but we all kind of kept it under wraps. And it was just such a historical moment. They wanted to make it very special. And it was very special. And I think that if everyone knew before, it wouldn't have been as special. It was an amazing surprise for the industry, for the whole fashion world. And not only for the fashion world, but for the world. People who don't care about fashion are so excited about it and so intrigued about it that actually it was such an amazing moment.
Especially for the London Fashion Week, I think.
Exactly.
Which needed a little bit of something to happen, because it's always the one which I feel doesn't have as much buzz as like New York or Paris. I feel like it's like that, and I think the Queen sitting in and making such a cute appearance, it was fantastic.
I guess
it was by far the most amazing.
Yeah, it was for me the highlight of
for sure. But between
so cool.
New York, London, Paris, Milan, like no one can beat it. There were drones going down the Dolce & Gabbana runway yesterday, and that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
And that would have been the highlight if it weren't for the Queen, because that was like so technologically forward and so incredible. But no one can trump the Queen.
You can't beat the Queen. No.
You can't beat the Queen.
I guess, Marina, question for you. That's kind of young designer at the absolute highest high.
Mm.
When you're starting out, what do you think some of the challenges are for young designers that maybe aren't selected by the Queen today to actually do something and stand out at any of the fashion weeks?
You mean the kind of fashion designer that wants to do a runway, or
I think anyone. I think anyone that maybe just wants to get involved in the whole buzz of what's going on in that city for
Of the
those
fashion week.
particular weeks.
I would say to be quite careful what you pick on doing, because it's very easy to think, yes, I must take part in London Fashion Week and have a stand and be in the main building, but it's an expense, and you have to be really cautious about just going there and existing and not inviting buyers and not inviting press. I wouldn't say the London Fashion Week exhibition rooms are like the best if you want to do wholesale. Personally, I think runway is probably a better way of doing wholesale.
Is that from experience, or is that just just what you
from
think?
experience. I've done the London Fashion Week only presentation and exhibition, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it that much. I would say doing your own presentation somewhere is probably a better idea. And also being careful if you really want to do wholesale, because wholesale is a whole other ballgame. And it's, once you step into it, you have to fully commit, because it can really, if you start a brand, it can really damage your brand if you don't do it correctly. So I would say you could also choose to be a wholesale brand with some own retail, or you can be a fully retail business that's your own and not do wholesale. So I think for young designers, it's really good to think whether you want to do wholesale, because nowadays you don't really have to.
And Anna, I guess for you, you I think work in the business side.
Yes, I was
of
actually
the
going to
London College of Fashion,
say that,
so-
because we just, in terms of the offer from an academic perspective, we do the business and management courses, which, and I think adding on to what Marina was saying, definitely knowing who you are as a designer, who you want to be as a brand, and where you want to go is key, because not all designers need to have that kind of business skill, but then they need to partner with someone that has it. And I do think that collaboration is crucial. So actually have someone that has the business skills and collaborates with you, or at least have a very clear vision of what you want to do, because it's very different doing it on a wholesale model or doing it a direct model. So I do think that if you know if you have a very set vision for you, then that definitely helps. And also have, something quite unique about yourself, have something that distinguishes you from others, which I think, sometimes it's not necessarily the commerciality aspect, because there's always that balance between the creativity and the commerciality aspect. But I think it's knowing that above all, it is a business. And it has to work as a business, and it has to sustain itself as a business on a long run. So there's more to it than just the aesthetics. And maybe I'm coming at it from a very design perspective, from a very business perspective, but definitely I do think it's crucial to have that nowadays, because otherwise you end up like you do a couple of seasons, and then that's pretty much it. And you're committed, and actually you're spending a lot of money while trying to do it.
I think it's super interesting. It's certainly something we see in industries much wider than just fashion with the brands that we work with. We have people that are incredible creatives, and then they just haven't got a clue how to write a business plan. Something as simple as that, because they're just so fantastically creative that they've not needed to touch any of that.
And actually, if they had, maybe they wouldn't be that good of, they wouldn't be as good of a creative person if they had all the business skills, because it's two different skills. I think it works if you partner, if you collaborate. Otherwise, I think you might end up trying to do a lot of things. I think you have to be mindful of you do have to lead. That's a different thing, but you don't necessarily have to know everything about how to put a business plan together. But you do have to know what's involved. But you just to make sure you lead that process.
I guess, Rob, for you, you're very kind of runway show focused. How do you back that up with the commercials as well?
I think with anything like you're saying about whether you're partaking in the exhibition or whatever you want to do, one thing I say is what Catherine and I have always wanted to do is be authentic. You have to, whatever you're doing, whether it's a show, it's a huge show, a small presentation, has to be authentic for you. And you have to ask yourself why you're doing it, and what is the kind of, it's kind of like a return on investment.
Yeah.
So you have to look at it, and you can get excited by putting on a show, but why are you doing that? Are you doing it to get extra press? Are you doing it to actually get in contact with a customer and then to come to your site and buy from you? To work out all the reasons of why you're doing it, and then work out if that is the best way for you to reach those people or create that extra awareness. Catherine and I are really big storytellers. It's something that's ingrained in what we do, and we get inspired by humans, and they lead our narrative. So we started off in the kind of the show space, just doing an exhibition. We then built to presentations, and then it was actually with PR that we were with. They said, well, you've got so much here behind what you do, and you're telling us, but you're not. This is not reaching out. It's not doing. You're not. That story's not coming through. So one season we did a small film, and we did it with a digital schedule. And we had this. They gave us this screen, and it was part of the BFC, but it was really not the best way for us to tell all this story. And that was when we said, okay, we're going to go off schedule and just do what we want to do. And we told a lot of story in our music. We interviewed people. They went into the music. Like there was so much. It was based on kind of the poor parts of America, and these rich gathered on pictures. So we had bales of hay. We got in. This wasn't a big production. This was us family and friends lifting them into bales of hay. I've got a farmer friend. Let's get on.
I've got a farmer friend.
Really hands-on, right from the beginning. But what it did do was really cement to people looking at us. Okay, there's so much more here that you're trying to say with your fashion. And then from that moment on, we're like, okay, this is what we need to do, this is what we're doing. And then we see kind of what comes back from that. So it's kind of being authentic to yourself and also understanding why you're doing it, not just doing it for the sake of it. You've got to understand who you're speaking to and why you're speaking to them, and how is the best way to do that for us.
Yeah.
I guess
not feel pressured to have to do it just because you feel like, oh, it's on a fashion week, I have to do something. You know, you can do it your own way.
Yeah, I guess,
so right.
Gabriella, for you, a lot of what I loved reading about your PR agency is that you're trying to adapt that kind of multinational, huge brand thinking into much smaller, early-stage brands. What's your kind of playbook for doing that? Are there kind of a certain number of things that they absolutely have to do?
Definitely not. Like, I think that my business partner and I both came from multinational agencies and really high fashion brands, that we felt there was a need for some attention to young designers, and especially in London there are so many, and PR agencies don't necessarily cater for them, and they're so expensive and they're so high maintenance, and actually they just want someone as part of their team to guide them. They don't want a big PR agency, they just want someone to tell them what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, and also just hear all their ideas and act as a sounding board. And we felt that coming from a really big agency that we personally felt the need to cater to them, and it's so rewarding speaking to young designers and helping them and building their brands, because now that we've been going for more than a year now, and I feel like we've grown with the brands, and we feel like we're very much part of that team. No matter how big we grow, we still will be there, and we'll speak to them every day, and we'll be there to meet them every other day, and we feel like whatever direction they're going in, we're there along the journey. So there's no boxes that they have to tick. It's a young designer who really wants to grow that can't find the team to support them because they don't have the money backing them. They don't have, the high profile celebrities wearing their things down the runway, or, as a street style shop, because they're not a huge designer yet. So I think it's just support at the end of the day that young designers are really looking for, that there really is a lack of.
Go on.
I agree with that. I think you can feel when you start out that a huge PR company that has like big brands is going to answer everything, and because they have all these doors open, but actually you're a very small part of a lot of things that are bringing in them like money, and they're running day to day, so you do kind of can be left behind,
and you get lost
in it. But when you can find that person that helps you with your communications, that is really invested in you and believes in you, and it becomes like it's teamwork. Our PR guy Carl, he spent the build up to fashion. He's in the studio with us, and he's like going, right, I've just got this confirmed, I've just done this. We're all in the same room together, and that never happened before in bigger companies. They would arrive on the showdown.
Yeah.
Okay, this is it was all set out. This is what we're doing, and then after.
Not only that, we'll get there an hour before your show with our iPads, and we'll just stand by the door.
Yeah,
we don't even care what the designer is really feeling, because at the end of the day, it's all about the designer's emotions. So you have to play that in the lead up to the show. It's not just about the show day. It's about what he or she wants in the lead up, and it's making their dream come true. It's almost like a wedding for designers. It's their day, and everyone has to cater to their day, and you have to have that emotional, connection with your designer and your client per se.
So it's PR agency / wedding planner.
We just
that you're doing at the moment.
Yeah.
So you want everything to be right, and you want them to want everything to be right, and not be able to kind of just hide behind something that's a lot bigger.
It's very easy for the big agencies to lose that connection because they have so many designers and so many clients that they have to cater to. But when you're a small agency, and I don't think that I will ever lose this because I enjoy it so much that no matter how big we grow, which, hopefully it will be, substantial, but I always want to have that personal connection with my clients because that's what I craved and that's what I thrive for and that's what I have aimed for this whole time. But actually...
With that support, Anna, question for you. Education, Britain's pretty famous for, with all of the huge institutions that we've got. Fashion education at the moment, just taking it back to that kind of grassroots level, you're supporting obviously all of these brands, but are we doing it well enough? How do our skills compare with what's happening in other countries?
Yeah, I do think there's two things that we can... Before answering that question, I just to add on to the previous question, I do think that, and I've worked in quite big brands before, and I think from a marketing perspective, when you've got that business side, or whether you're working as a brand or business development or marketing communications, you always feel that there's always someone in a different department that will help you. And I think that whole structure doesn't apply to a small designer because they'll have to do everything themselves. They'll go through different departments. So actually, having that close connection with a PR company or with any partner for that matter, I think it's really important for them to know that there's someone there to support their story and that believes in their story and that is actually with them all the way, because when you have those big brands, actually, it's a lot easier to do every single thing is a lot easier to pull and to do. So definitely, I think believing in your story and making sure that that connection will be kept is crucial. I think when it comes to education, there's two things. I think when we look at the fashion design education, one thing that I think is very different in the UK is that it's a lot more self-directed. So I think it's more in terms of designers finding their own voice, their own aesthetics, and helping them in that process. But it's not, I think that gives you a lot of freedom to explore your creativity, which is something that doesn't exist actually so much in other countries. And then another thing is that what I think we do very well, and again, it doesn't happen in all countries, is we have support systems in place. So, for example, if I look at LCF, so at the London College of Fashion, we have the Centre for Fashion Enterprise, we have the Fashion Innovation Agency, we have different, almost like hubs or clusters or centres that are actually there to support, to provide mentorship, to provide a series of programs that are there to support you in that startup stage and actually up to the stage where you go to market. And they also help with access to funding. So, all these issues around coaching and how to do things, how to become more commercial, or how to actually set up as a brand, as a business, and not so much as actually how to have all those brand development skills. So I think that is something that we definitely do a lot better than most countries, because we do have those support systems in place, and we have those places that are there and those kind of people that are there to actually support you in growing your brand.
And Rob, is that what you found? I know you said you spent a lot of time out partying till 5 a.m, but aside from that...
One thing I actually wished happened it's quite a few years ago when I was at college. One thing I wish that had happened was that there was more collaboration with the different fields within the industry.
Yeah.
I met a lot of people when I was intern and I left. And then what happens is you all go off and do... Everyone wants to be want to be a designer, and then actually people went off into magazines, people off styling, PR, lots of different things. And actually, it's then when you start your own label, and then you get in contact with those people, and it is a lot of that collaboration.
Yeah.
That everyone's at the same kind of, like you're saying, if you're starting a PR company and someone's a new designer,
you're at the same level.
You're the perfect
Yeah.
point to kind of come together.
Mm.
I wish at college we'd had a lot more of that kind of collaboration We've done projects maybe with the marketing people.
Yeah, we do have that now, actually, funny enough. So maybe it was a bit late to the game.
Having a bit more business-minded kind of thing.
Yeah.
But actually, when you're all locked away,
you don't really know what other people are doing.
Actually, if you meet them at that kind of grassroots when you're studying, that you might create those relationships so that when you come out of college, you go, actually, I've got these ideas. You're great at that. I mean, God, you're great at that. Why don't we kind of just start together and help each other now? Because once you're out there searching for those people, it can be a lot harder.
Yeah.
It starts earlier. I would have liked that.
I actually, we do foster that now because we, and it's not just the case with us, but there's other institutions as well, but we do develop projects where we bring together the business students, the design students, and the media students, and actually you get a chance to make your network a lot bigger because you actually know someone from fashion journalism or someone from women's wear, and you're just, you might be doing fashion marketing, and actually, and you're put together in a team to develop a project. But when you graduate, you already have those connections. You already know who you work well with. So there's a photographer, or there's a stylist that you actually, you work with. You've got the very similar aesthetics, and then you can potentially have a business together with them. So. And
the industry works because of all those people.
Yeah.
So everybody needs everyone. This first collection we did was a small capsule collection. We created, Catherine and I, we saved lots of money, we did it, we created it, and then we were like, we need to photograph this. And this is like right at the beginning when we weren't showing.
You called a farmer friend.
Well, we did lots of things, but we got a friend of mine was at a magazine, a really old friend of mine, and she puts in contact with actually somebody that was at a PR company, the communications store, and she was a friend, Laura, that we'd met, and we just met her for coffee, and she gave us this advice of going, don't jump into shows straight away, do a beautiful book, beautiful images, and send it to not thousands of them, just like send handful to like say 30 people that you want to get in contact with and write to them and go direct, hand deliver it, like do that actual connection thing. And that really helped us, and that really kind of set us off on a really good footing. But I think it's like sorry, I've lost my way now. What was that?
Photography, collaboration.
You need people. You do need them, and once you start, and if you haven't got them, then you're kind of really trying to find in this kind of sea of people the right people to work with. So if it starts earlier,
Marina, collaboration. The Basic Store is probably one of the best kind of collaborations of young London designers that we're seeing at the moment. I absolutely love it. Bit of a weird super fan of it. It'd be interesting to hear from you on kind of how you're scaling your business, but how that plays a part in it. Because obviously you've got Marina London, which is the silkwear brand, and then you've also got the Basic Store as well.
Yeah. I started Marina London in 2011, and I'm not sure when it was. I think it was about 4 years ago. I decided that I really wanted to do a pop-up store just for my brand, and then I was like, actually, how boring would it be to just have a store with silks? So I figured I knew so many people that are creative, really amazing designers in London, and I said, well, why don't I find a space and then we share it and we all split the rent, and then we can all show in this space. And I think that's the most amazing thing that's happening right now, is that hopefully it's happening in schools. People are interacting a lot more than when I was at school, because it was very similar to you. I was at St. Martin's and there was like zero interaction, and projects did not happen. It was very loose. Once you leave school, through Instagram and social media and so many other ways, you can collaborate with so many people. And if you just look for them, you will find them. You just have to be quite persistent.
And why a store? I think if we would have been here a couple of years ago, people would have been talking about the difference between online and offline and how they maybe play together. Now it's just one thing. It's the same. But I guess for you, you talked a bit about wholesale previously, but why not go into a Harrods or a Harvey Nicks or try and do that? Why actually launch your own space? What's the attraction there?
Well, for me personally, I found that, I did approach, Net-a-Porter, Harrods, everybody. But the thing that happens is that when you're quite a small designer in a factory, let's say, like my factory, if you're quite a small customer, they kind of put you at the end, so your collections can be late. And if your collection is late, no one's going to take a risk on ordering your things. So, for example, if I was late for Net-a-Porter, they were going to be, losing money and everything. So they were not going to invest in a designer who's quite risky because they won't deliver on time. Maybe not due to my own fault. So I just said, you know what, I'm not going to do wholesale. I don't want to let people down. I mean, I used to be in a few stores, and that was great. So I said, well, I'm just going to do my own retail. By that point, I had a nice customer base online, which was growing really nicely. And then I decided to just open a store to see how retail works on the street, because I think, I've always loved retail, and I've always loved the idea of exploring retail and what it can do for the brand, and also this idea that then I had with to bring other brands on board. I just felt very passionately about it. So yeah, I think I just decided to try it, and it worked, and it's worked so well. So I'm very happy.
And what's the plan for you? How many more stores? Is it going to be 10 a year? Is it you going to roll out a whole chain?
That's outrageous. No, I think I'd love to just continue the pop-up concept. Trying to figure out ways of doing it at the moment, which help the Basic Store grow as a brand. Figuring out how to take it online a little bit as well, but not too much of that yet. Maybe abroad. Yeah, got a few.
Okay, awesome. I guess
ideas.
everything's been pretty positive so far, which is lovely. But confession time, which is kind of appropriate given where we are. A few questions on this, but first, let's start with you, Rob.
Great.
What is the one mistake you wish you hadn't made?
Oh, God. Oh,
Not
sorry.
Amazing.
One mistake, I don't know.
You might be perfect and have never made any.
I was perfect, but as Catherine will start for me.
Catherine nodding furiously in front.
I never really... Sorry. Kind of going, yeah, that was a mistake, but anyway, moving on. There's
Okay.
big things happened in my life that makes me kind of go, hey, so we're okay.
So you wouldn't do anything differently?
No, because the things that I think we've got wrong have helped build who you are. So, I sound like... But I genuinely kind of go, actually, there's no point getting upset about those things. There's no point... I think if you hold on to that regret, it stops you from growing. So it's really like, okay, be honest that you made a mistake, but actually how do you kind of learn from it and get better? But I can't think of actually one big thing that I kind of really... was a huge thing.
Amazing. That's good.
Not at the moment.
It's fantastic.
Wow.
Marina, you've had a bit more time to think. Anything that...
I think probably two. I think for young designers, some advice I can give from my own experiences, wholesale didn't work for me. So I definitely regret doing wholesale in the first place. And then the second one was... Oh my God, what was the second one? I just had it. Hang on.
Should we come back?
It was a really good one too.
I'll give you 2 minutes. We'll come back.
Yeah, come back.
Anna.
Are we on the mistakes question still?
Yeah, but do your own as well, but then potentially like some insights from some of your students maybe.
Okay, I can... Well, I guess if we're on a wider topic of setting brands and setting, like different businesses, I did develop 2 different brands while I was doing my PhD, because my PhD was about brand development and the kind of factors that have more chances of succeeding in the industry. So I guess there's one mistake, and that I've learned from a previous brand that didn't work out, is that in the initial stage of it, I didn't have the right partner. And I think that is a crucial thing, because there were different opinions. So if you're actually making sure that you do have the right partner and one that is actually looking at the same rates of development and same concept and aesthetics in you, then that's definitely crucial. And then the other mistake in that process was that I think instead of growing organically, I think from the beginning we were aiming, because we both came from industry and big brands, we were aiming at something quite big. So simple things like, we're hiring a website designer to do the website. Or we want something that, once you kind of click on the link, it recognizes your IP, it knows exactly, it changes all of this kind of big system in place for orders, for wholesale and all that. And actually, there was nothing in there yet set up, but there was all this system that was supposed to be created behind. And obviously it didn't work because we were so concerned about all these little issues, operational issues, that we kind of forgot about what was the main thing about the brand in the beginning. And then the second one that worked out quite well and is still going was because it was something that started small and grew organically. And I think anything that is big, whether, should we now do wholesale or not, it was dealt with at a certain stage. So after 3-4 years, and then you deal with it. So, we've got a new challenge coming up in the year after, and you deal with that challenge afterwards. And I think growing organically was something that I've learned from that previous mistake. So it was kind of like a practical application of the PhD, but actually, it was something that I think is actually quite useful, because when you set out in the beginning, if you try to do something quite big, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will work. It's good to have that in mind, but I think it's better to grow organically and knowing exactly like every single step of the way what you're doing.
Marina, have you got it?
Yeah, it was.
Was it that wicked?
It was actually my second collection. I decided to make too many pieces, so I kind of had too much stock left over. And it wasn't my favorite collection that I designed, so I wouldn't say it was my strongest. So just for young designers to not create too much stock that they can't then sell. That's a big one.
Gabriella, you've had time to think about that answer, but I'm going to ask you something completely different.
Fantastic.
You might not say that. So, 2 brands.
Yeah.
One who is just crap, who's not nailing it at all, and then 2 who's absolutely smashing it.
Brutal.
Yeah. What am I choosing? But what
as
you
a
think, client, or
what you just your personal opinion in the industry today? Who's doing amazing things?
Oh.
Obviously, you can pick your own clients if you so wish, and who's not doing amazing things at all. Who needs to up their game?
Do you know what? I don't know who needs to up their game. I've seen so many strong collections. I don't know. That's a horrible answer for you. I understand that.
Okay, widen the scope a bit. And I can think of lots of people who are nailing it.
Even Juicy, who's just relaunched their collection, they're doing amazingly.
What about
Juicy, who wasn't fantastic, and now
all the department stores that are completely dying?
Sorry?
All the department stores that are completely dying, they're definitely not nailing it.
They're not, because the designer's doing so well online.
Okay. And he's good. Who's smashing it?
Who's smashing it? Richard Quinn.
Exactly.
Who's not smashing it? He is, he went from being quite unknown outside of the fashion industry, and now he's a superstar overnight, so that's really impressive. But in terms of who's not smashing it, I think that's really hard to answer.
Okay. It's very polite.
Sorry.
Very polite. We are here. You've got to be honest.
I have to be.
The situation.
My mother's watching me. I have to be polite.
Anna, same question to you. No explanation. Just give me 2 names.
Oh God, that's what I ask my students when I interview them to come to a place. I think who's not. I think I'm going to give you like bigger. Prada isn't. I don't think he's doing a particularly good job at the moment. Okay. I think they had better times, in my personal opinion. And who's doing... it's tricky. Who's doing well? I've mentioned Molly Goddard before and Marcus Almeida before in the interviews prior to the session, and I think they're 2 good examples of designers who are doing particularly well at the moment, because they've got quite a strong aesthetics and they're being true to that aesthetics as well. So I would probably name those 2.
Awesome. Rob?
Smashing it, I'd say Marcus and Milda.
Yeah.
They're actually friends, so they just like. But I think one reason I think they're smashing it is because they're them. They're very authentic. They're just them, and they're doing what they love to do, and they haven't changed. They just haven't changed.
And who's shit? Who needs to? So.
I don't know.
God, I can't think of anyone.
It's a really hard question.
It is a hard question. I think. Do you know what, some people that I'd like, some brands that maybe you feel aren't doing great, but I think what happens is you have this. What's out there, what people can comment on and can say whether you're doing great or not great, but actually companies or brands go through shifts of going pushing boundaries and being at the forefront, and then you go through a phase where you have to, like, especially if you're doing wholesale, you have to sell and you have to keep commercial, you have to keep retailers happy and customers happy. That's why you're doing it. But then, you get feedback and go, actually, like, these things, like, there's a jumper that we did that just keeps selling. We changed it. And then all the customers came back and went, why did you change it? We want that one. We just want it in different colours. So you start doing that, but then you get someone going, oh, you haven't really moved it on. You haven't pushed it. So you're like, okay. So we push it on. And then your customers go, well, we really liked how it was. I'm not going to buy it. So you've got this thing. And I think especially, I was going to just say, like, somebody I thought was like, is like Armani, because it's always Armani. But actually, in that term, Armani's doing brilliantly because they really know what they're doing and they've got it down. It's not as exciting in the 90s as when maybe I thought Armani was when he was really at the forefront, but actually they got it down, and they're not lost it, kind of thing. So for me, it's like, I think just brands go through shifts as you go along. One thing we always asked in our first ever season, and now I wish we knew what we knew now, was that quite a few people said, so what's your signature? To pull out your signature piece. I'm like, well, these are the first 9 garments that we've actually ever made, so I don't know what that signature is. So we were like, how, I don't know, and you went, oh, this is a signature. Oh, really? Well, we'll look forward to seeing that next season. Well, we moved on. And you're finding your feet. Now we have signatures, but in the beginning you don't, because you're finding your feet.
You're still trying it out.
You go
still
through phases.
Yeah.
You go through, you have, I think most creative industries are like this, but you're competing with brands that have got decades of experience and budgets. You're trying to compete with them and show at the same level of them, but you're just starting out, and you're kind of having to show that facade of being that brave, but also be the most creative because you're in London. You have to do that. Also keeping customers happy. There's so many different levels. So I think when people say, "Oh, that brand's," I'm sure. Do you know what? It will probably happen to Marcus and Mer. Like there's a bit. People will get a bit tired, but then they're probably answering something else, and then they'll come back. So I think it just goes in ebbs and flows. So I wouldn't say that anyone's doing crap. They're just finding their feet and doing what they need to do.
Marina, throw
there were
under the
two
bus.
quite interesting articles I was going to say quickly on the Business of Fashion last week about 2 British brands, Stella McCartney and Charlotte Olympia, who both aren't, Charlotte Olympia, who supposedly isn't doing very well in the US, but she's an amazing British brand. So people will go around saying that she's not doing very well, but actually she's doing probably quite well in the UK, but maybe not so well in the US. And then Stella McCartney, who's selling her shares back, who's buying her shares back from Kering, and everyone's saying, oh, I'm sure that's happening for a reason, but actually it's probably just because she wants to own her own brand, and like she's trying to be empowered. So there are these 2 brands. This is a constant shift in the UK market, and people are constantly trying to bring successful people down and write bad things about them.
But there are brands that are going under. There's people that just aren't innovating, and they don't have that crowd that want to keep coming back and buying things all of the time. What about some of those guys, Marina? Who needs to...
I mean, I love Regina Pio at the moment.
Yeah.
I think she's my favourite, hands down. She's using amazing girls as models, girls that are not necessarily models. And her show's always fun, the girls, I just love how diverse they are. And then I've hardly ever liked Marc Jacobs, personally. I mean, it's just like a personal thing. I think you're probably asking personally what you think is not, Marc Jacobs.
What about Mansa Gabrielle, who I don't know if anyone saw, basically ripped off one of your beautiful dresses, actually. I guess in that sense, the more successful you get, and I don't know if you've seen this as well, Rob, the more people will try to imitate it, because if they see what you're doing, it's perfect, it's all over Instagram, it's gorgeous, they want a piece of that. How do you deal with that? And is it flattering, or is it just a pain in the ass?
I just kind of... The reason why I shared it on my Instagram was just I wanted to bring attention to it, because I just thought it was quite funny.
Surely it's flattering.
I wasn't like angry about it, but I did want to bring attention to it just for the sake of doing it. I would never imagine that, I have any rights over a dress I've designed as a shirt dress. I mean, it's very generic, but the reality is, it's probably going to happen. And
it's quite complimentary, if anything.
Yeah, exactly.
It means your design was
maybe
beautiful, and then people want to copy it.
And I think it happens way worse with brands that have way more kind of specific designs that are very, their own design, and it's more obvious in some cases than in my case.
So that's probably something that you wouldn't necessarily want quite as much, but if you could pick kind of getting into a speed round here, because I think someone's waving at me from the back that we're running a little bit over. Who would you want to wear your clothes if you could pick one person? It can be living or dead.
Oh, me?
Yeah, sorry, I was it?
Oh my God, it's
You're
very
like,
hard.
interesting question for everyone else.
Charlotte Rampling.
Really? Why?
Yeah, I mean, I just love her. She's always been my favourite reference for a woman. I've just always loved her style. I don't know, there's something about her that's always drawn me to her. That's like
Amazing.
number one.
Gabriella, apart from the Queen, obviously, if a brand could, so Richard Quinn, who would wear his clothes? What's the...
Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Why?
Just because that's always been like my woman. She's so chic, she's so elegant, she's so Parisian.
But she only wears black.
But doesn't she look amazing in it?
Yes, that's true.
Put her in a Richard Quinn print dress and she would look even more amazing.
Anna, if you could pick one person for, I don't know, one student or for yourself, who would you?
It's actually a tricky one. I do. There's one person that I admire because of the spin that she put into like wearing different designers in a very conventional role. That would be Michelle Obama. So I quite admire her, what she did in terms of fashion in that while she was at her role. Yeah.
Awesome. Rob?
She's actually worn us, but Tracy Ellis Ross is quite amazing.
Very casually, she's actually worn
Well,
it.
that was
my
exciting.
favourite person in the world.
That was exciting when it happened. One, because she's very outspoken, which is very us. We didn't know it was happening. It was on the Ellen DeGeneres show, so it was like a huge thing across America. And seeing her in it, and just, I mean, she really made it her own. She's just, for us, she's kind of embodies Tatum Jones Warren. She's like outspoken and cool. And her mum's Diana Ross, so.
Helps.
Yeah, I'm a disco fan, so.
Two final questions before we go to questions from the audience. First one, let's fly along. Let's go Anna, and then let's come along. What is the one piece of advice that you give to someone starting up a business in fashion today?
I think is making sure that you build a loyal consumer base that trusts you. Because once you gain that consumer's trust, then you're able to sustain that business in the long run. So definitely, making sure that you gain their trust and you build a community.
Awesome. Gabriella?
Same question.
Same question.
I would just say stick at it. I've seen so many designers who have been, torn apart by editors or stylists or people in the industry who just like to criticize, but actually they know what they're doing. They're good at what they're doing. So don't take it into consideration. Keep doing what you're doing. And if you believe in it, then at some point someone will.
Awesome. Marina?
I would say when you're first starting as a designer, probably just make sure you have a realistic customer. So when you think of your own brand, the customer that you imagine that would be shopping that brand, what is her budget? Don't imagine that she has £1,000 the whole time. Make it realistic, and also I think really figure out the business structure in terms of, again, wholesale or not wholesale, and make sure you've got enough funding to do it. Be clever about how you do that. Start small, definitely. Don't do huge collections off the very beginning. Maybe do like up to 8 styles in a few colorways or print ways. Just make it manageable, I think. Just start small.
Okay, Rob?
I'd say get your inner team set, your inner circle, like the people you trust around you, because as you said, that you do get lots of opinion. Once you start, lots of opinions come flying in, and a lot of, I'd say a lot of the time people have opinions, and you've got to kind of, people have their own agendas. That sounds quite sinister, but it's like they're from their side of things. I think to begin with, you could have there's a very cool magazine that you want to get into, but actually as your customer looking at that magazine, yes, it might be like quite a fashion week, London Fashion Week, cool magazine, but actually if their readership is 20-year-olds that are kind of listening to certain kinds of music, and your customer is a Harvey Nichols woman that was nowhere near and reads Stoke say, then there's actually no point going so hard on that.
Doesn't belong there.
And listening to their opinion. So what you need is, but that still comes towards, what you need is your kind of inner circle, that when you have those, like, you know, those doubts, those questions, that you can go, really, is this what you think? And they can go, yeah, actually listen to that, or no, I think, you know, we can forget about that. So yeah, getting your trusted people around you.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Final question. Fashion is really hard sometimes. It's a very bloody hard industry. What kind of keeps you going, inspires you, gets you up in the morning? Anna, if we start with you.
I think, yes, it is hard. It's hard to obviously make your name in industry, whether we're talking about designers or even, you know, if you're a student and want to work for a bigger brand, it's very hard to actually make sure you will end up doing that. I think what is exciting about the industry is that it keeps changing every day. And there's always something out there. And it's actually an area, a field where a lot of these things are tried out and tested, and, you know, things like technology and all this. We were talking about the drones before, but all of these things around wearables, and there's so much to come. And I think that's what actually, personally, that's what keeps me going, is the fact that every day there'll be something different. There'll be a new challenge, there'll be a new barrier, but also there'll be an exciting new market to explore. So I think it's the fact that there's always something new.
Awesome. Gabriella?
I think for me, what gets me up in the morning is being the first person in the office, because I want to make my team work harder. If they think I'm going to be earlier than them, then they'll start coming in earlier and they'll work harder.
Don't say that out loud. I think our CEO sat here and everyone will know that I'm never the first person in the office.
But
Let's
I think
not say that out loud.
Really, it's the young talent in London. It's really being there to support them. It's really being that person who can really understand them and become part of their team. I think that, especially with PR, it's very easy to buy into an agency whereby you'll have hundreds of people there supporting your brand, but what you really want is that one person who will sit in your office and really be part of your team and answer your phone calls in the middle of the night and, you know, listen to your problems that you have that aren't even PR related, but just because you want a sounding board. And I think that's what really motivates us as a company.
Awesome. Marina?
For me, I think it's probably number one, my customers, and then number two is the people I kind of surround myself with. So the community I've managed to build mainly through the Basic Store, other designers I know, people in the design industry and in the fashion industry that I've gotten to know. I think that's probably, once you kind of come out, because I like you know, when you design, you just go into your own little bubble and you're stuck there. But as soon as I went out and I found new people and I made myself available to speak to other people, I mean, that's really what gets me going, is mainly the Basic Store as well. It's such an amazing opportunity to be with creatives.
Well, I love it. Please keep doing
community.
it. Rob?
Having fun. We were at a talk a few years ago. Said, don't let anyone tell you working hard can't be fun. And I think when I started in this industry, there was this thing, it felt so dated, that it's like, fashion's hard and you're stressed and we're all stressed and we're all going to be horrible to each other in those environments. And then I actually started working for people that actually just said, yeah, it's hard. We work really long hours, but there's no reason you can't enjoy it and have fun while you're doing it. And that's the environment Catherine and I have created. They work so hard, but I think they work harder because we create a really fun environment. Let everyone enjoy it. You're working towards a show in that moment, like our first deliveries. Like, yes, we're going to work through the night, but let's
Crack open a bottle of wine.
Yeah,
at
let's
11
have a
o'clock.
laugh when we're doing it. Making ourselves feel bad about this.
I love that.
Just enjoy it.
Enjoy it.
And on a bottle of wine as well.
Yeah.
I think no one can drink in here, so you're probably all kind of sobering up and desperate to get back out. But before we do, we'll take some questions from the audience. And Alice, I don't know if we have any Twitter questions that have come in. Yep, question at the back.
At the moment, whether it's climate change, whether it's the Me Too movement, Trump in America, whether it's Black Lives Matter, there's so much happening politically, economically, with sort of activism, what people believe in. Yet in fashion, you're not really seeing anything. In the past, you did. Do you not think that fashion is an art, and as part of the future voice, you should be seeing collections that are trying to help people change their mind and make a better future?
For me to answer that,
I think you should answer that.
Go for it.
Personally, we are really, but it's actually a bit behind the scenes. It's not. Someone said to us, we're not. I'm gonna get this wrong. We're like kind of like silent activists. So, if our subjects that we look at aren't normally fashion subjects, and for last season we interviewed 25 women from all over the world and asked from all very different kind of places and backgrounds, and asked them 3 questions that united them. What is their most joyful moment in their life, the saddest moment, and what gives them hope? And then we interviewed them months ago, and we filmed them, and we took them as recordings, as work with the British Library doing. So we're storing those interviews to ask them to kind of see what united them as women. And from those subjects, especially the sadness part and the joy part, a lot of subjects came up about depression, grief. What else is like lots of different subjects that affected women, and then we are now working with lots of discussions with the UN, and some of the women have also set up causes. One woman was Mara who set up Income, and she's teaching us about intersectionality. That, and she actually, as an activist, hadn't realised. She'd always thought that fashion couldn't help. So she kind of would disregard it, and then she's met us and she's like, actually, I see you're really into this, and we were actually, what she's teaching us, we think other designers would help from this. Something else we've done with our, I hate the word diverse casting, because we've always cast like this, but we are trying to kind of open people's eyes. We've we're a different range of models.
Different ages.
Different ages. We use disabled models, but I wouldn't even say it wasn't intentional. We met Kelly Knox, who's modelled for us for the last 3 seasons, and her disability is secondary to her issues in her life. Like when you actually get to know her, so I feel that we don't have the scope to push it hugely, but we are very passionate about saying something about.
Do you think the industry in general? You go down the high street today, every single shop window looks the same. You have no idea who.
Maybe not as the industry as.
Season, other than maybe Christmas Day election, there was nothing that really represented what's going on in the world right now.
Well, actually, it's probably happening backstage because the British Fashion Council. No, of course not. But it happens in small doses, and I think that it's more important to be backstage because actually it's the models that get discriminated the most in a runway show. So there's a new initiative by the British Fashion Council whereby models can no longer be in the same room as a photographer when she's changing. And that's actually a really big movement for the British Fashion Council because photographers could be everywhere, and models would be changing everywhere, and they'd be photographed half naked the entire time. And those photographs would be published in the newspapers the next day, or they'd be put on the wire, and anyone could take them. But actually now there's a strict rule where any half-naked model, any even almost nude model could be, they can't be anywhere near a photographer, and that's like a very, very strict rule that the British Fashion Council have enforced, and that's actually a really big movement towards it because what happens on the runway is they're walking down a runway and they're wearing clothes, but actually the awful things happen backstage. And you might not see it and you might not feel it, but that's where change needs to happen.
I do think there's an area where we could be doing more, and that, because I acknowledge that we're doing all of that. I do think that when it comes to sustainability, for example, and educating consumers, we could definitely be doing more, especially brands that have those big budgets to work with or that are part of bigger groups. We do have some groups that are doing a very good job in embedding sustainability into their business, into their brands, but I do think there's more around the education of consumers that we could be doing, like raising that awareness to how we consume fashion. That's not a sustainable, and it is not a sustainable way to consume fashion. I think I think we do still have a bit of a place to have a bit of room to grow.
A lot of younger brands in London, especially, the kind of sustainability and a lot of causes that they believe in, it is ingrained in them, but it's not amplified. Because they aren't a big brand. So if you like one-on-one know the brand and you realise actually they have their fabrics from here or they make everything in this place and they really care about those things, talking to other designers, it's something that a new bunch of us really care about, but it's not necessarily something we are able to amplify to the scale that, say, a bigger brand is. And maybe we should be trying to amplify it more, but again, it's having the resources to do that. But the core belief of actually trying to make a difference, I think, is ingrained in a lot of the young brands in London.
Yeah, backstage is probably right, I think, as well. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Transparency with sustainability and looking for sort of better ways of producing, especially with big brands when this sort of big feminist is quite hot and critical right now, claiming to be eco-sustainable when firsthand I had experience of where things that are plastic are being known to be not plastic, and probably competing nourishments and making more eco products, and they're not how we trust brands, especially.
Good question.
How you can actually trust them? I don't know. I think you can contact brands and ask them, but again, who knows the bigger ones if they're going to tell you exactly. I think what we've started to sign up to. There's a lot of new groups that the BFC are starting. There's something that was started by Vivienne Westwood, and it's about how companies, brands can start to use kind of better electricity, start using less and less resources, and we've joined that. And we can't, the size of us, we haven't been able to do what the bigger brands do and change over straight away. But what they are doing is helping us step by step is move to being greener and basically make our company run better. But it's a long program. So there's a lot of different groups that are starting up to help brands do that. So I think one of them is called like Positive Luxury. They're a different body, but they are, you can join them and they can help you step towards be transparent, and I think if you go onto those kind of sites, they're checking that you're transparent and that you're doing everything that you're saying you're doing.
I think there's also I think sometimes, I do agree, I was mentioning it before that, bigger brands especially do have a responsibility to be more involved in sustainability and educate the consumers. However, there's also the challenge of knowing everything that happens in your value chain. And sometimes, even bigger brands don't know that because they might have, they don't really know that someone where, place where they've put their production actually outsourced that production to somewhere else. So they're not fully, I think it's making sure that they work with good partners, with good manufacturers that they trust, and that they completely trust that they're not putting their production somewhere else, and that they're fully aware of the whole process. So sometimes I think we're quite quick to talk about certain brands as having done this or that, but sometimes they might not be aware of what's behind of what was actually done. But there are a lot of companies. There's Positive Luxury. There's also Provenance, for example, that is working with the blockchain technology, and they're able to trace all the stages of that supply chain and tell the whole story. So I think there's a lot of different initiatives and companies that are being set up and that are out there to help brands, regardless of how big they are, input that into their their model.
When we joined Saks, we had to all of our manufacturers had to be audited. One of our manufacturers saying to Rebecca, and then because they stocked her, they were like, okay, well, we've already audited them, so they're checking for minimum wage, kind of working conditions, all of those things, and that's actually a government body thing, and it's kind of, I think, the EU America, and also there's all these codes, and basically they have people come and visit those workspaces. So sometimes if you go to a store, you can kind of go, actually, if we hadn't passed, if our manufacturers hadn't passed, then our orders wouldn't have been taken. So you can look and see some stores have those kind of regulations in place, and that can help you know that you're buying something that's authentic.
Any final questions? I think we're kind of well over. Quick wrap up from me. I guess a lot of what we've been talking about tonight is all about authenticity. You've probably said the word about 10, 20 times, but it's obviously something that's so important and so relevant in society today. And then also being able to tell that story is super important. I think a lot of things we talked about the younger designers, having the importance of building up that community around you, maybe from really, really early on, and building that network out, speaking to the right people, kind of having smaller guys around you as opposed to thinking, let's go and speak to all these kind of huge brands. And all of those bits, I think, for me and for the brands that we're working with are things that, brands like you guys are kind of almost responsible for giving on to the next generation of brands who are learning all of that, if we're to kind of stay at the forefront of that industry. Just very quickly before we wrap up, I hope everyone's enjoyed tonight. The venue, I think, is absolutely fantastic, and just wanted to very quickly thank the House of St. Barnabas for having us, and just tell you very, very quickly kind of a little bit about them if you don't know. They're a charity pledging to break the cycle of homelessness, social exclusion in London. They're a not-for-profit members club, and they're kind of trying to reinvent that whole notion of a members club and exclusivity and what that means. And I guess a lot of what we've been talking about tonight, and including people in those conversations, really relates to a lot of what they do. So I think it's been a really relevant place for us to be. Hope everyone's enjoyed it. If you've got any kind of follow-up questions, please share them on social media. We've got a few of the team here as well tonight if anyone wants to chat to those guys. They're generally wearing jumpers with Space for Ideas across them, because I can see one over there. Otherwise, that's all from us. Thank you to our speakers, and good night.
Thank you.